Hi, everyone. We're not live yet, but we just thought we'd turn this on and see who can join the call. We're going to start in a few minutes, and I see the numbers going up there, people joining on live. So it's nice to see you all here. Patrick's here too, of course. So we'll just take a few minutes here, and we won't start till exactly 7:30 Eastern. So we've got about 4 minutes or so. The numbers just keep jumping every minute. For those of you just joining, we're just waiting a few minutes until we're right on time. And we have lots of people joining the call right now. So I'm Laura, and we're recording the webinar, but we're just going to make sure we start on time. I just wanted everybody to be able to get right on and see this first slide and see us and say hello. Get going. Okay, hi everyone. We have lots of people joining the call right this minute. I'm Laura Scapitici, the Director of Programs for the Anthroposophical Society, and I'm so lucky to be here with Patrick today for our webinar, Hearts Are Beginning to Have Thoughts, the Meaning of Michaelmas. And lots of people are still joining the call, so we're just going to take a few minutes to go over what it means to be on a webinar, ask you a question or two, and then I'll introduce Patrick and we'll get started. So I just want to say thank you to all the people that have registered for this webinar. We've had almost 500 people sign up for this webinar with Patrick, and we just feel so fortunate. And thank you all for your donations. We've had a lovely number of donations coming into the society to support programs like this, over $1,000 so far. So thank you all so much for that. And that just helps keep these kind of programs going. And this is one of the things we've really taken up, is that we want to have accessible information available to people all over the country and all over the world about anthroposophy, particularly in relationship to festivals. So we have lots of programs going on all the time, but this is something we wanted to make sure we made a priority and make them free to people. So those donations really do help, so thank you. And so I would like to just try out the Q&A function so everybody can just see how that works, because we will have time after this webinar for people to ask questions, about hopefully about 30 minutes or so. So there is, if you see, there should be a bar maybe at the bottom of your screen or maybe at the top that says Q&A. If you see that and you're able to type in a question or an answer, what I'd like to know is where you're calling or viewing from today. So let me see if I can get any answers in here. Oh, yay, it's working. Okay, wow, look at all these people. Okay, oh my gosh, it's all moving so fast. Okay, someone's raising a hand. Oh, hi, everybody. Okay, we've got Virginia in the house, California, Portland, Chicago. Let's see, so if you, okay, so Cecilia's giving us a tip. She said, if you can't use the bar, you just have to move your cursor over it and it'll show up if you can't see it. Oh, Mount Shasta, Fargo, Pennsylvania. Patrick and I are both familiar with Pennsylvania. Where else? BC, Langley, BC, hello. South Carolina, Asheville. Wow, people from all over the place. Someone's here from Scotland. Yes, thank you, Scotland. Kimberton, Hawthorne Valley, Delaware. Wow, this is so great. Thank you so much for all being on the call. And we should have time for questions afterwards, so just keep this function in mind as we get closer to the end of the webinar. Okay, So let me just make sure I've covered everything here. Thank you again so much for those answers. And what we're going to do now is I'm just going to introduce Patrick. So I just want to say I'm so grateful to be working with Patrick. When we conceived the idea for this webinar, people said, ask Patrick Kennedy. He's a great speaker, and I'll just tell you a little bit about him. And we're just getting to know each other. Patrick, you grew up partially in California and partially in Pennsylvania, which is sort of my story too. And you've been studying anthroposophy for over 20 years, and you've been a Christian community priest where you were ordained in 2006, correct?
Correct,
Yes.
yeah.
And a young family too, and living out there in Spring Valley. So we're so glad that you're joining us today. And not only are you just bringing this depth of information to us and all the thoughtfulness that you've brought to creating this presentation, but also humor and a lightheartedness that's just really wonderful. So thank you for bringing all those great qualities to this. And so now I will be quiet and let's get started with the webinar. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Laura, for that very warm introduction. And I wish I could see everybody. It's a very powerful experience, I think, to try out these kinds of technologies. I think in part because there's a certain illusion I think we all live with, which is the number of people who are dedicated to the spirit and dedicated to working for a really human future is a small number. And so I think a lot of us have feelings of powerlessness and isolation and being alone. And when you do something like where we've only advertised this for 2 weeks and suddenly there's 500 people, we're a group of 500 people, and that's just the people who could sign up for this. I think these kinds of things don't make the news, that there really is a very, very large number of human beings all over the earth who right at this time feel deeply a sense of responsibility to humanity. And I would say also a proper kind of helplessness in front of what's happening, in the face of what's happening. And when we try to turn our attention to the festivals, I think we're trying to lift our souls up out of this individual experience in myself to participate in a larger spiritual life from which I can get new forces, new strength, new inspiration. And all of it has to be gained in a new way. And you could say part of Anthroposophy's mission is to renew the festival life, and that is enter the field of time, leaving just this experience of being limited in space and enter into this fabric of the weaving of rhythms and time, which is always a cosmic experience. It involves the sun and the moon and the stars and the breathing rhythms of the life of the earth. And you see signs of this kind of seeking of the renewal of the festival life all around the planet, I think. And one of the festivals that's really, really brand new and where Anthroposophy, I think, has a sense of responsibility to try to bring it in some way is what we call the Michaelmas festival. Rudolf Steiner was very strong about it, though. He said, it doesn't yet exist, and don't go try to make it happen. There's going to have to be enough people who so deeply live with it and so deeply understand it and have imbued themselves with who Michael is, what his mission is in this world, that it will arise organically in a true form. And I think the process of seeking that and striving towards that is still where we are at. So when we say the Michaelmas festival, I think it's very important to say it's not some kind of finished thing, but rather human beings, through the gift of spiritual science that came at the beginning of the 20th century, are just being made aware that we need this festival. We need a special relationship to this being we call Michael for the particular challenges of our age. And so when people say Christmas, when people say Easter, there are a lot of feelings, a lot of memories, a lot of nostalgia. They have lived very strongly in the course of humanity. Even, I would say, the St. John's Festival, the summer solstice, the fire burning festival. There's a little bit more of, I think, a feeling about what that is. But what the Michaelmas festival is beyond an image of Michael and the dragon painted. Like what does it mean to celebrate it? What does it mean to understand it? This actually, I think we're very much at the beginning. And so what I'm going to try to bring today is just a couple of crumbs that I have gained through my life with anthroposophy and the work of Rudolf Steiner and my life with Michael. So I want to say again my gratitude and express the honor and privilege I have to be with you all, wherever you all are in the world, to turn our attention to this festival. Why don't we go to the next slide, Laura, and take a look at this thought that went out in the announcement about this particular webinar. The age of Michael has dawned. Hearts are beginning to have thoughts. The springs of spirit fervor no longer only flow from the darkness of mystical feeling, but from clear soul brightness, thought informed and thought sustained. To understand this is to receive Michael into the heart. Thoughts which seek today to grasp the spirit must spring from hearts that beat for Michael, the fiery thought king of the universe. This is a quote that is pulled from the book called, in English, Anthroposophical Leading Thoughts, in which Rudolf Steiner, at the end of his life, began to give his final writing testament, which was what is sometimes called the Michael letters. Again and again, from different angles, describing who Michael is and what he is trying to bring to humanity, that we might be able to go forward. And there's something about this picture of hearts beginning to have thoughts which stirs the imagination, and something about it touches us. Even as it's talking about clarity, however, I think part of us goes, okay, but I still don't actually know what that means, because isn't thinking a brain activity? How in the world do hearts have thoughts? Somewhere intuitively, I think human beings know what that is, but it's harder maybe to lift that into consciousness, or why that would be significant to do that. And today I'm hoping I can offer something of a perspective on what is meant by that, and what we can do daily, weekly, yearly, monthly in our lives to help that to happen, that our hearts begin to have thoughts. Maybe the next slide. Here we have an image, something of the classical image that puts an angelic figure in relationship to a dragon. Both of them have wings, and stems as a kind of relic from the Middle Ages, and paints the whole activity of angels and dragons as something outside of us. And the secret to understanding festivals in our time is to understand that these are processes and cosmic dramas that are taking place in human consciousness and on the stage of human history. But we have to lift ourselves up to that kind of a perspective where we can understand it, so we can permeate such images with insight, and otherwise they can remain kind of strange, like from a children's book. Next slide, please. For those of you who are somewhat unfamiliar maybe with Michael at all, or the understanding of Michael that Rudolf Steiner brings in his anthroposophical work, I thought we could take this particular passage up. Who is Michael? To that power from whom the thoughts, I can't actually quite see that, hold on, I've got a face in the way here. The thoughts of things proceed, they gave in old teachings the name of Michael. Keeping the name, one may say that it was Michael from whom human beings once received their thoughts. Michael was the regent of cosmic intelligence. I'd like to stop there. So in this kind of cosmic language, we're given a picture of, I think in American English, cosmic intelligence, it sounds so almost space age or something. I don't know how it goes for other people, but when the word cosmic is used and they capitalize it here, cosmic intelligence, certainly one probably imagines the stars, something far distant from the earth. But the first line can help us out if we go back to it. To that power, so there's a force, there's a power at work in the world, from whom the thoughts of things proceed. This is the key, I think. Cosmic intelligence is a new way of phrasing what was said at the turning point of time when St. John wrote his gospel and spoke of the word, the logos. That there is wisdom, and there is a thinking, a divine thinking, that is actively shaping and creating and working within the world, in all things, in the rivers, in the clouds, in the trees, in the grasses that are growing, in the mountains, in the processes of the earth. All of this is filled and permeated with, another word was Sophia, wisdom. All things were permeated with meaning and wisdom, and this meaning was the active force that was shaping the cosmos, and cosmos is the old Greek word for world. So it doesn't have to be too space-agey. It's very concrete. It's very normal and real. The things all around us. And from these things, thoughts emanated and entered human consciousness, and they came to us through this being who the ancients called Michael. That's this first thought. We can keep that name. And his job, and this is a really difficult word to translate as it says here, Michael was the regent of cosmic intelligence. I don't know if anyone knows a lot of regents around in their life. I think I went to the University of California. We had some regents, but I'm pretty sure that's not what was meant in this phrase. Sometimes the ruler, or the word in German is verwalten, which is almost as prosaic as administration. His job was to manage the cosmic intelligence. He wasn't the originator of it. He wasn't the source of it. There are higher beings from which this cosmic wisdom emanates. But Michael, as an archangel, that is one rank above the angels, had the task of being the mediator to human souls. That is, bringing those thoughts, that wisdom, into human consciousness. And so for human beings, the experience was when I have insight, when I receive wisdom, I'm receiving a gift of Michael. So all wisdom and understanding was experienced as revelation, was the divine world speaking into my soul. Insight and wisdom in myself was an experience of what the Native Americans would call the speaking of the Great Spirit. So that was his task. He was that one who was mediating that gift. And then comes this big dash in the middle of this quote. Something changed. From the time of the 9th century on, human beings ceased to have a sense that their thoughts were inspired by Michael. Thoughts had fallen from Michael's dominion, management, care, regency, and sunk from the spiritual world into the individual souls of human beings. Now, more and more people have the experience, as I'm thinking, I'm not experiencing my thoughts as the divine world speaking in my soul. I'm just like thinking. Mm-hmm. It becomes fallen. It becomes this small intellectual activity. And now here's where we can go towards the question of the seasons, because this ends up becoming a crisis. But it's connected to a direct human experience that everyone knows. So Michaelmas falls in the time of the year in the northern hemisphere. For those of our brothers and sisters who are in the southern hemisphere, they have a different seasonal experience, which is the fall. It's autumn. And the seasons have these nodal points. These nodal points here now, these equinoxes, the fall equinox stands in special relationship to the spring equinox. And the poles of the solstices also have a special relationship of the summer solstice and the winter solstice. So the darkest time of the year in the winter in the northern hemisphere has a special relationship with the brightest, warmest time of the year, the height of the sun's power, the summer solstice. So the St. John's Festival, which falls in the summer solstice, has this special relationship to Christmas, which falls in the winter time. You can experience that if I describe it in the simple pictures. Winter, there we have a festival during the darkest time of the year where outer light is weakest. We celebrate what is needed, which is the birth of the inner light, the birth of the divine child within. At the summer solstice, where the light is brightest around us, the world's light is brightest, there we celebrate the birth of conscience, the practice of conscience, which is actually the experiences of becoming aware of our shadow, the ways in which I have not yet permeated myself by light, where I'm not actually just a shining, radiant being. The summer solstice, where the world is brightest, I become aware of the way in which I cast a shadow, conscience. So there we see this amazing reversal in the polarity of the summer and the winter. The fall and the spring also have this polar expression to it. So if we turn to the spring and the Easter festival, the festival of resurrection, we have before us what one could describe in the following way. The earth is in the wintertime. It is cold and barren. Hidden inside it is something that could come to life. But it is waiting for a power to come that will call it out. That power is the gift of the spring sun. As the light and warmth of the sun increases in the springtime, it calls forth this extraordinary abundance of budding, of life that breaks through the earth, actually breaks through and up and out into the air. These hidden things that are hidden in the cold earth break through the surface of the earth and reach upwards towards the source of its life. through the gift of the sun, which gives its light and warmth, the earth is called out of the forces of death, of winter, into new life. That's the season of spring, but it's a picture, it's a macrocosmic picture of what then took place in the realm of history with the resurrection of Jesus Christ. The same process happened where the death forces in the human being were overcome by the being of the spiritual being of the Son, the Christ being. This being poured itself into the human being and went into death, and thereby brought forces of wholly new life into our humanity. So if we take that picture of the spring, this festival of the resurrection of the body and the resurrection forces of springtime in the earth, and we turn our attention to Michaelmas, now we have the reverse process. The earth is actually going into a death. It's dying away. It's glorious. Because the reality is the thresholds of birth and death are the most spiritual, physical moments we can experience. And this is a little side note. Apologies for going that route. But anyone who's been present at a birth or been present at a person's passing, both moments are simultaneously sense experiences that are at the same time spiritual experiences. In the same way we have that as we see the buds break out of the trees, we can't help feeling something spiritual moving in our souls. And when we see the trees light up with reds and yellows and oranges, it's beautiful, but it's dying. The trees are dying. Life is pulling out of those leaves, and that's causing this fiery process. And soon it will be brown and crispy and wrinkly. It's not going to be so pretty very long. So the earth is dying away. And that presents now a new kind of threat, but I'll say it this way. As the earth forces die away, the life forces that are active in the earth, human consciousness increases. Now, for some of us, we love the summer and we love the dreaminess, and we could bask in that until, that's why we move south when winter comes. But there are those of us who just love the fall because you wake up again. That's why we start school in the fall. Nobody starts school in July because it would be a mess. You would just never be able to do it, because human consciousness awakens as the earth dies. That's the terrible gift. We need the earth to chill out, to say a very prosaic phrase. That is, the earth and all its power of the summer needs to recede and calm down and go into that cold barrenness so that we can awaken to ourselves. The problem is, if our consciousness and our sense of ourselves rests on the dying away of the cosmos, then our consciousness is at the threat, faces the threat of also dying. Now I'll spin it around and put it another way, which is this is just the modern issue. The modern issue is we have woken up. We, as it says in this quote, the intelligence has fallen away from Michael and it's landed in human souls. We are thinkers now, but our experience of thinking is wintry. It's intellectually cold. And so people who are drawn to the spiritual life are often usually fleeing thinking. They're like, I've gone to school, I went to physics class, I learned that this is a big random molecular accident, I learned that the cosmos is the Big Bang, and I am a great random mutation. And my heart says that can't be true. So I seek other forms of spirituality that can feed my heart, because my heart has been given stones. In our modern consciousness, our worldview, which has become so materialistic, which has fallen, we've forgotten who we really are, and we've forgotten where we've come from, and we think we are nothing more than matter. That's the winter of human consciousness. That's the pictorial representation. Winter has taken place, has happened. We've entered the season of winter in our minds. And that's because thought has fallen out of Michael's regency, and it's fallen into somebody else's sphere. And the name for that somebody else that Rudolf Steiner gives is Ahriman. It comes from the old Persian, who was in opposition with the great being of light, Ahura Mazda, in the Zoroastrian tradition. The being of light, the being of the sun, in opposition with the being of darkness. Ahriman is the winter spirit, the crystalline coldness, the clarity of thought, which seems so opposed to the warmth of the heart. And so you could say the fundamental question of humanity is, when will springtime come for human consciousness? When will that power that can draw out the forces that are lying hidden inside us and can lead us to spiritual knowledge again, when will that power come? That's Michael's mission. His ultimate and deepest longing is, how can I reconnect humanity to spiritual wisdom? The issue is, he loves and honors our freedom. Because the other thing that Michael is interested in is the free individual, which comes about through this winter time of the intellect. And he would never violate that freedom. That means if anyone is going to reconnect to him, they do it because they reach out to him. It has to become an activity that begins in human beings. He's let go of cosmic intelligence, but he's generating a sphere just bordering on physical reality, a sphere full of radiant warmth and light, which is the place where spiritual thought is taking place. But that means human beings have to work to enter that sphere if they want to go, because it becomes a free deed. Of course, the big question is, how do we do that? How do we imbue our thoughts with the warmth of the heart? I'm seeing at this point that we are very close to ending my portion of the presentation. So I just want to take you to an image of someone who is a master of this art. And that is slide number 12. Laura, if you could take us there. If you don't know who George Washington Carver is, allow me to have the great joy and privilege to introduce you to him. Sadly, he is thought of only as the Peanut Man. Born just about 3 years after Rudolf Steiner, during the end of the Civil War, he was a slave who during the Civil War became stolen property. Raiders came to the farm, the Carver farm where he was born, and stole his mother and himself. Luckily, the Carvers valued him and his mother and were good people, as far as you can say slave owners are. And they spent a great deal of money to try to get them back. And they recovered George, but not his mother. So he grew up on their farm. And from the earliest age, I'll give you only just the briefest of outlines for his life, he was gifted with the perception that the world around us and all nature is speaking. Every flower, every weed, every leaf, every soil is like a letter in the book that God wrote. And with a kind of depth of reverence, wonder, attention, gentleness, patience, the likes of which one can only ascribe to a high master of the inner life, George approached nature. And through that, it would guide him eventually to be allowed to attend what would become Iowa State College as the only African-American man there, and go through the biochemical training, becoming a biochemist. And he was so excellent at it, he would be hired immediately as an assistant professor by the professors there. Now, that university was considered the best in the country. All of our agriculture department ministers came from that college in those early days. But at that time, Booker T. Washington had started Tuskegee Institute down in Alabama. And he heard about this black man scientist, and he wrote him a letter and said, I know you've got all kinds of things waiting for you in terms of fame and success in your career. I can't offer you much but hard work and very poor circumstances, but your people need you. Will you come? And he knew he had to go. And the story of his life is something that I only recommend you look into, but what he was able to do, if you live with him and study him, and I would recommend a book called The Man Who Overcame. When he would take something into his lab to understand it, he would spend a long time talking to what he was holding in his hand, like you see in this image. Treating the flower as if it's a being greater than himself. Sending basically the light of interest, compassion, and love as a force of knowledge towards the flower, knowing, if we go to the next slide, the following. Anything will give up its secrets if you love it enough. Not only have I found that when I talk to the little flower or to the little peanut, they will give up their secrets, but I have found that when I silently commune with people, they give up their secrets also, if you love them enough. Now hold that quote next to the next slide. This is a quote from Rudolf Steiner's description of what we have to acquire if we want to transform our thinking to become actually truly Michaelic and lead us to the spirit again. This is from chapter 5 in How to Know Higher Worlds, the chapter on the conditions for esoteric training. This is from the 6th condition. And the 6th condition is described as the practice of gratitude. How much is needed to enable each one of us to receive and maintain his existence? How much, I should say, do we not owe to nature and to our fellow human beings? Thoughts such as these must come naturally to all who seek esoteric training. For if the latter do not feel inclined to entertain them, they will be incapable of developing within themselves that all-embracing love which is necessary for the attainment of higher knowledge. Nothing can reveal itself to us which we do not love. And every revelation must fill us with thankfulness, for we ourselves are the richer for it. Holding such language from Rudolf Steiner and George Washington Carver before our souls, we might imagine the mood of soul which the modern scientist goes into the lab. This analytical taking apart, cutting up, and putting under microscopes, trying to get at the core of things, ends up always only giving us surfaces. Inner beings never reveal themselves to someone who digs in, who cuts in, and who tries to find out what you're all about. They flee from that. Inner beings reveal themselves to the ones who approach them with love. I'd like now to go to our 19th slide. Those who feel called to lift their thoughts back up into relationship to Michael, that is permeating our thought life with the forces of the heart, can use this quote as a kind of preparation when we meditate or when we read the works of Rudolf Steiner in spiritual science, when we read true wisdom, because it leads us to experience that our thinking life is lifted up only when we begin to recognize it as an altar. And now I'll read these words. They now know that they ought to let Michael, not Michaelo, sorry, Michael dwell in their hearts. They now consecrate their thought-born spiritual life to him. They now, in their free and individual life of thought, allow themselves to be instructed by Michael as to which are the right paths of soul. This consecrating of our thought life, letting his content, which contains who we truly are in our spiritual nature, the spiritual nature of the human being, where we truly have come from in the spiritual origins of the earth and the cosmos. If we experience that into our thoughts, his light is radiating, we begin to have this experience of warmth and spiritual enthusiasm in our hearts. Those are the few words that I wanted to try to offer in service to an understanding of the Michaelmas festival. I am very grateful for your patience in listening and very much look forward and welcome questions that may come up and comments. I want simply to also just say that at the end of this call, if you feel further called to make a donation to the Anthroposophical Society, which is this group of individual human beings who want to consecrate themselves to Michael's work in the world, please do so. It supports the great work of people like Laura and many other activities in our society. I am so happy to not take any money from this work tonight and to give my work to the society.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Is everybody clapping? We can't hear you clapping where you are because I am too. Thank you so much, Patrick. That was absolutely amazing. I'm sure everybody saw me like writing things down while we were going through this. And thank you for your kind words at the end too. That was very generous of you too. Thank you. So, wow, that's a lot to take in and such beautiful images you provided us with. And so I'm just going to look at this Q&A and see if people have questions they want to ask now. This is our time where we can think about what you've brought and think about what this festival means.
Should we go to full screen or how should we go?
Yeah, let's see, we can stop the share, and everyone will get these slides. So whether you were on the phone or you're on the computer, you'll get the slides. So I'm going to stop the share, and then that should be the two of us. So I'm going to check out. Okay. So here, okay, here we have some. Okay, so, okay, here we go. So do you have specific, this is Cecilia, do you have specific suggestions for how to meet these times? We are working with becoming aware of Lucifer and Ahriman pulling at us now. What can we do to meet this? We have a whole bunch of questions here, so I'll just tell you that ahead of
Why
time.
don't I start with that one? That's a very powerful one. Thank you, Cecilia. Yes, one of the other central missions of Michael, who has become the guiding spirit of our times, the fact that he's the guiding spirit is expressed by the fact that human beings feel anytime something comes into life that divides human beings from each other, that put us into parties, that put us into races, that put us into political separation, gender separation, anything that separates us from our humanity, from our shared humanity, that is working against his mission. Michael sees that and wants to serve, that as we become more and more human individuals, that should also allow us to develop a new human community, a community over all humanity. Now, I say all of that because of what you say about Ahriman and Lucifer. These names that Rudolf Steiner gives to, you could say, our enemies. That is the people who are working against a true human, the beings who are working against a truly human future. And if at any moment I have fallen prey to the idea that a human being in flesh and blood is my enemy, I have fallen into their hands. And I've fallen from Michael. Michael leads us to the Christ, who would wish to show us, as he says, for example, at the end of Matthew's gospel, what you've done to the least of my brothers and sisters, you've done to me. He identifies with all human beings. This fact should make us aware that our battle, as Paul says in Ephesians 6, is not with beings of flesh and blood, but with beings of darkness, powers who are actually beyond the physical world, working to sow division in humanity. But that work of actually developing true radical compassion and understanding is really hard. And I think one of the secrets is this phrase, an enemy, this is a quote, an enemy is someone whose story I haven't heard yet. Mm-hmm. So if I witness somebody doing or saying something that I find destructive or terrible, where I'm finding myself getting reactive and full of anger and hatred, if I'm finding myself full of anger, hatred, exasperation, these just aren't positive spiritual forces. They actually just increase the darkness. So when we say, and understanding the story of somebody, there is their individual biography, which can reveal all kinds of things. If I knew what they had gone through to be acting the way they are acting, would I not have more compassion and understanding? Michael challenges us to look deeply, to take an interest and understand, and not have quick judgments. Look so deeply that we look beyond the individual biography to the biography of humanity. He's fought this great battle in the spiritual world to clear up some space in the spiritual sphere, but he sent all of the dark forces down onto the earth, and they are loose. In this time of the winter time, the dark forces are loose, so we should have great understanding, compassion when we find our brothers and sisters falling prey to the adversary. And we should work to try to understand them. So that means we have to understand, well, who is Lucifer? What's that side that I can fall prey to? Who is Ahriman? What's that side I can fall prey to? And what is this truly human middle that is represented in the being we call Christ? So I think that's a great answer, Cecilia. Focusing there can be a great help.
That's great. And I think that well relates to another question that's come up about, how do you subdue or slay the dragon? And it's
yes,
here
subdue or slay. I think I saw that one.
Yes. Yeah.
It's maybe even a third option. Certainly the image is, and I think that's valid, of if all the pictures that are really accurate, you see Michael kind of holding the dragon at bay.
Mm-hmm.
But what Rudolf Steiner gives us is actually develop interest in the dragon. Mm. Because the understanding of our enemy actually overcomes its power.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
It puts the dragon into chains of light. And the light is literally understanding. And that's why one of the great gifts is Rudolf Steiner giving so much information about who these adversaries are, because actually understanding them, not attacking them, but understanding them overcomes them. And in the Christian way of saying that is love your enemy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to just keep scrolling down. Okay, there's been 2 questions about the festival piece of this. Like, what activities would you recommend for a festival? How do you bring this to, or talk about it with children? Like, how do you, so that's one of the questions that's out there.
As I said at the beginning, we're going to be fumbling around for a while. So just to be patient with ourselves, I think is really important. So the first work is to work really hard to understand who is Michael, what is the drama of our time, and how is he working in it. From that, the seeds that lie inside us of this festival will grow. And I would say maybe a little bit as a kind of thing I've observed, because we understand festivals usually actually in the previous era. Mm. What I mean by that is the Middle Ages, mm-hmm. or for children, when we create adult festivals that are like that, when it's kind of like, let's sing a song and have a pretty table. I don't mean to be offensive about those things. They are wonderful. However, if it doesn't include this penetrating insight for adults, it's misplaced. For the children, great stories, of which there are just countless, and new stories that people can create that reveal the Michaelic powers and activity of overcoming the dragon. This is a wonderful way to do it. So then paintings, of course, are great for that, and imagery and tables, they're all really, because they live in that other state of consciousness where more pictorial mythic imagery works. The hard work falls to us for adults is, how do I make it a festival of human consciousness? Because I tried to say that's where it happens now for Michaelmas, is resurrection in human consciousness.
Thank you for saying that, because you want to bring something really true to it. That's not just about what's out there and going through the motions. And so that is hard work.
If you can do that, if some of us are working on that, then you can add, please, things like eurythmy, artists, musicians who've done deep work to try to explore tones in relationship to Michael. I mean, there are people all around the world working on these things, and when they will come together, there will be beautiful attempts.
Right.
But it begins there.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, a couple more questions here. Can you speak to Michael's, I think this is Camilla asking, speak to Michael's relationship to courage, because we hear this so much for children, and if you have children. It's, so much about courage. And I think you're talking about it all through what you've said, but maybe just a little more on that word in particular.
Yeah. Hi, Camilla. So glad you're on. Yeah. This is an interesting one for me. Again, what I've witnessed is a little bit kind of like we want to pray to this being to come and take care of the dragon for us. To be just very clear about it, because of course, it's a dragon, and we're just, a dragon is a big deal. But to know that we have entered the age of spiritual maturity, the divine world is saying, you're up. It's your turn. And the courage is, you believe I can do this. Now, there's all kinds of chaos and terrible things that can go about as I'm struggling to face the dragon. But basically, it's the divine world through Michael and Christ that actually has faith in us. What other courage could I need? So I experience he calls us to pick up the sword of truth and the shield of faith. And wield that ourselves. But that means entering the fray. And knowing that we are called to the battle of our time for the human being and for a true picture of the world. I love to think of what I think is an extremely Michaelic moment is in the Lord of the Rings. Last battle. The powers of Mordor have been gathering. The gates are opening and the hordes of trolls and goblins and giants are coming out of the dark gates. The all-seeing eye is above the volcano. And there's this tiny little band of human beings, a wizard, a couple elves, dwarves. And they're looking at the odds and they're like, you know what? We're not going to make it out of this. And Aragorn gives this speech which is just one of the most beautiful speeches ever. He said, there are certainly times and places where in the face of these things, human beings have had reason to run and will run, but not this day. And this whole way he describes it, but not this day. And to know, that's the kind of courage we need. We need a courage that is a courage which is resurrection courage, that is the willingness to die. Because we're awakening the spiritual part of ourselves. And that's why you meet a person like Malala, a young girl, Pakistani Muslim, who goes Michaelically into the world and says, you know what, girls should also be able to have full education as well, and I'll risk my life for it. Even to get shot in the face, and I won't condemn my shooter. That's Michaelic courage. It's going to take that from all of us. Or even a few. Because when one person does it, it's like it's a sunburst of spirit on the earth.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Stop making me cry now, Patrick, please. Oh, okay. So let's see. Got another question here. I think we'll probably just kind of close in a minute. So if anybody else has a question, please ask it. I just have someone named Pam is saying she's talking about an American legend that fits the Michaelmas theme. That's John Henry. She's talking about, one might think of this man versus the machine. And she said it might make a more appropriate play than St. George today. She's talking about that play. So if people are asking what to do, that might be she's suggesting that possibly.
That suggestion. I don't know the John Henry story well enough to comment, but just what you mentioned makes sense. What would be the modern version of facing the dragon, the Ahrimanic dragon? Yeah.
Okay, and then I have one last question. Someone's asking about the painting behind you.
Yeah. Um,
That's
I'm so embarrassed. This was a special gift from my friends in Baltimore, who we had a study group with for many years. And as my going away gift, they gave me this painting, which is called Chalice. And I wish our friend was on there who helped arrange it, but there's a woman painter down there who painted it, and um, I don't remember her name. So hopefully, maybe Gail's online and she could say. But yeah.
yeah, and if we figure out who it is, then
Oh, thanks, Laura. Yeah.
we'll include it in the PowerPoint. Okay, this wow, Hildegard Carlin.
Thanks, Gail.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you. So I have more questions here, but
Should we
I
maybe one
think
more?
yeah. Let me see. The adversary seems so overwhelming this year. Are others feeling this? Someone asked. But then I have a comment from someone else. It's a little bit long, and so I think I'm not able to kind of get to it right now. But you know what? I will pass it on to you, Patrick. Yeah,
I think the
asking.
overwhelm one's important.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'd love to take it up because I think it's totally universal.
Great.
There's been all this flooding,
Mm.
pictures, and it comes again and again recently of whole cities kind of being basically just filled with water, right? You think of what happened even at Katrina, or in Southeast Asia, 2005, or with Fukushima. Just these incredible images of waters bursting the borders and overwhelming human culture. And those are like images of what human souls are feeling this time, because actually we're more perceptive and sensitive now. But if you take what I think is really healthy to do is ask, how has this feeling of overwhelm come about? Why is it that the adversary feels more strong now?
Mm-hmm.
And usually, if you look at it, it's because of the news. Basically, it's not, if nobody was watching the news and they were just paying attention to the nature around them, their neighborhood, I mean, probably traffic would be one of the more annoying things in their lives. But most likely it might be things like a friend is dying of cancer, or there'll be real human experiences that are very direct. The news is it's like human souls are being manipulated in the most powerful way to be full of feelings of fear and overwhelm. So if you look at what feelings arise in my soul as I take in the information delivered to my house, to my phone, to my computer. Oh, feelings of fear and overwhelm. That's like an astral flood that fills the earth atmosphere, the spiritual atmosphere of the earth, which is delicious food for our adversary.
Mm-hmm.
There is so much good happening right now in the world that will never make the news. The number of people who are sacrificing and loving and attending to a sick child, bringing a pie over to Jane who's got cancer. I mean, it's so overwhelming, and the amount of people working dedicatedly to come up with alternative forms of energy, create new forms of community, renewing things in Detroit. Doesn't make the news, because the news is a vehicle of the enemy. You could say it's the docket. In Revelations 12, which is a Michael passage, the enemy of humanity is described as the lawyer who, before God every single day, is bringing evidence that humanity is not a good idea. That is the news. The news is basically the evidence delivered by the prosecution that human beings are a bad idea. And so all kinds of feelings of hatred, disappointment, despair, all get generated by this lawyer who's really good at what he does. But Michael actually believes in the human being. And it takes work to turn our attention to all of the light that is actually shining right now on the earth.
Yeah.
And so to become aware of the fact that that's actually just the docket of that lawyer, I think is a real help. And they want me to feel helpless, powerless, overwhelmed, and afraid. And it's right there that I can wake up and become alert. What's really going on? Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you all for this wonderful questions. And that was Jennifer that just asked that overwhelmed question. That was just so wonderful. And lots of people.
Thanks for the good words, Andrew. Just saw you're on there.
Yeah, just lots of, and you know, if we didn't get to answer your question today, I'll be sure to email you and we'll pass this on to Patrick and see where we can go from there. Let's all keep talking to each other. And thank you all so much for being on the call. And
Thank you,
Patrick,
Laura.
thank you.
Never done this before.
Oh, you did it.
I'm so surprised that it felt very human.
Yay!
I'm just so thankful.
That's wonderful. Okay, thank you everyone, and look for your recording and the PowerPoints, and yeah, we'll all talk again soon. Thank you so much. Bye.
Oh my gosh.
Here we go. I'm gonna talk to you in a minute, Patrick. Bye.